Good afternoon, dear Andrea. I'm so delighted to have you today because I understand, you are in Australia. You are 8 or 9 hours ahead of Europe at the moment. So good afternoon for you and good morning for our audio.
Thank you very much. And good morning to you, Katarina. Delightful to be here with you.
Oh, my pleasure. Please, can you tell us a little bit about your company, Amplify Me, because what's behind your business? What and how you aim to support tourism and eco sector? But you are not only in these two sectors, as I know.
That's correct. No, thank you for asking. So I aim to help businesses understand other people. I think ultimately everything I do is around connection and around cultural understanding. Tourism lends itself very well to that. So I do a lot of work in the tourism space, supporting businesses and supporting regions and helping people understand what the region offers. So one of my roles at the moment is chair of a regional tourism board, and we try and help people realize there is more to Australia than just the coast, than just the big icons. We see problems with over-tourism in cities like Barcelona, and Venice. We're trying to say there's a lot more to see. And the more we connect and the more we understand each other, the more the world is a better place. So I do that in tourism. I do that in business. I do that in my work with WCEI and my women's associations.
Oh, great. You are a specialist in strategic marketing and communications. What unique challenges do travel and tourism business and international business face today, and how does Amplify Me address these challenges?
That's a very good question, because I think there are lots of challenges, particularly in an international way. But again, it comes back to the understanding. So I think how we help address is we help do a lot of education on how things work in other countries. So with the travel and tourism, for many years, I worked with the Chinese market. Obviously, COVID, Australia, we closed our borders to China. So that really paused my business quite substantially. So I also work now with technology companies, particularly from Singapore and the Asia Pacific region, trying to help them understand how to come to Australia, and for Australians, how to go to their country and do business and how to engage with each other in a more culturally appropriate, more effective way, and helping them through training, connections, and introductions.
And how much did, let's say, the world change after the COVID? I mean, from the point of traveling, but it's not only the traveling, it's also international business changed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. So travel changed. And in Australia, I can give you an example. We closed our borders very quickly. We were one of the first countries to close to China, and China was our biggest market. So what that created was a lot of political tension, as well as suddenly many businesses were really struggling because their main market suddenly collapsed. But I think it also created a little bit of distrust for a couple of years. I think we've come out the other side. Many of us have realized it's really important to maintain those face-to-face connections and to see each other in person. But equally, I think we've realized there are other ways to do things. So it's changed the way we do business in so many ways. In Australia, what we did is we traveled our own country for 2 years and everyone stayed domestically. Now, I think we're about $16 billion more going outbound than we have people coming inbound. It's a very big difference between the two.
Oh, that's interesting. And I know that you also learned Chinese,
Yes.
Chinese language, Chinese
Yes.
tradition.
Yeah.
It's maybe very interesting. Maybe this was the turning point in your life and how it impacted to your business, because this is interesting, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was young, my father brought home a piece of calligraphy, and I thought I would like to learn that language. So back in 1988, I had the opportunity to study in China, and I studied for 1 semester, and I decided at that age I'm going to go back to China. So I spent about 7 years living in Asia through my 20s. And obviously it changed and shaped my worldview. And it means all the business I do now is almost entirely focused around the Asia Pacific and the China region. China, obviously with COVID, I shifted a little bit from China, but I do a lot of work now with Singapore, with Vietnam, starting to engage more with Cambodia and Myanmar and Indonesia, and really trying to connect right across the Southeast Asia way. So for me, it opened up a fascination that I really wanted to embed in my business. And again, my business came back to helping people. For example, we always assume in China they don't do camping and caravanning. In fact, they love camping and caravanning. So I did a lot of work in the camping and caravan sector here in Australia to educate them how to engage with the Chinese tourists, to give them a better experience, to help everybody have a better outcome, both from the tourist perspective, but also the businesses, that it didn't impact their businesses negatively, and that both sides learned how to work with each other.
But it's very interesting, that even I would like to say fascinating, because what you say to me, it means that it really changed. I made a tourism business as well, because many people, and you are not the first person who tell me, the people started to not prefer, maybe to do much more caravanning and campaigning. So
it's local. I think what we're seeing in Australia is people want to experience Australia like a local. And we see that in the world is we don't only want to go to the icons. And that's why a lot of the work I do is also about trying to help people engage more broadly or in areas that you wouldn't normally go to. It's lovely to go to the Eiffel Tower in Paris, but is that a Parisian's experience? No, they have a local arrondissement that they live in, and they live and work and play in that area. It's a very different experience. So trying to give you a real local experience.
Oh. Do you have, by the way, time to go to China? Let's say often, or?
Before COVID, I used to go twice a year. Since COVID, I've been going to Singapore, Vietnam, and Cambodia mostly. So mostly Singapore.
The China is a fascinating country. I have been there several times, and I think there's so many interesting cities, and nature is fascinating as well. And
may I ask you your favorite? Yeah, absolutely.
I like, I really enjoy it, but Beijing is a little bit different. But Guangzhou, for example, I like a lot. I love also, the nature, which was not in the which was in the central part of China. So, but it's so different, even better.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And Vietnam is very similar. It offers some beautiful scenery and a lot of differences between the South and the North. And I think that's what we learn to appreciate, is the differences in these countries and just the history, the culture, everything that it offers. It's hard for it not to be fascinating.
Yeah. I should also ask you, this question is maybe not so, let's say, even urgent in your country. But in Europe, we feel that Chinese are, let's say, everywhere, that they are so strong in business, and this is not very, let's say, good for European economic. So what is your point of view?
Oh, wow. That's a very interesting question. I think there are some very strong strengths in the Chinese economy and certain businesses that I think because of their critical mass, they may dominate, and we need to learn to work with them and find ways where we have a competitive advantage over some of what they do. Because every country brings a different strength, whether it's in our people skills, the way we look at things. And I think we can't be afraid of them. I think we need to learn to work collaboratively with different countries, including China, but equally also have a healthy skepticism in terms of how we deal politically, that everyone still protects their own way of running their country, running their businesses, etc. And choosing ethically. I think there's also something to be said for businesses not always to be done on the lowest price, but on who aligns to your values. And Europe obviously sits at the forefront of influencing things like the modern slavery provisions. environmental provisions. So Europe is leading the way. And I think Europe has to stand strong in that. So that's a very short little world view, if I may share that.
I'm not afraid. I see it's a very inspiring country. But for example, business negotiations and to find the right way how to negotiate, because it's not always easy. It's a cultural difference we can meet. What do you would like to advise us? Maybe we don't see some small details which are very important, maybe to be much more, tolerant. I don't know. What kind of approach you recommend us to have if we start to do the business with China?
I think with China in particular, but I think it also applies with every country, take your time. Learn a little bit about the culture. Take the time to look at it as a long-term opportunity. It's not, I want to make a quick dollar and I leave. You want a long-term sustainable relationship with your trading partners and with your countries that you're working with. And I think develop relationships. And we say this in Australia a lot as well. We're actually a very relationship-based country, where we don't do business quickly. We don't do business only on the bottom price. We do business with people we like and business with people we trust. And China's going to be exactly the same thing, because they've built up companies over years and they want to know that you're going to be there next year and the year after, and that there can be a relationship. I also advise people to take advice and actually work with somebody who knows the country, but even who knows the area, because you were talking before about the nature-based areas in China versus Guangzhou versus Beijing is quite different. Every area has its differences, and they won't necessarily respect or connect with somebody from a different region. So they tend to be very localized as well. You wouldn't work with somebody from Guangzhou if you want to do business in Beijing. So actually find a local business partner who understands how business is done properly, and maybe straddles both a Western and a Chinese business viewpoint and can assist in building those bridges.
But this is also the role of Amplify Me.
Yes. So I have taken many entrepreneurs, particularly in the tourism industry, over to China. I've also taken them to Singapore and to Vietnam, and I've brought Singaporean companies to Australia. And in all cases, we always say, slow down. You're not going to do business on the first trip. You won't do business on the second trip. In China, they always talk about cups of tea. It's going to take you 1 cup of tea to start to get to know me. It's going to take 2 cups of tea for me to share a little bit more information about business. The first cup of tea, you don't even talk about business. The 3rd cup of tea, maybe we'll start to talk about our families more and a little bit more about the business. And then we slowly progress to building a trusted relationship.
I suppose that your knowledge of Chinese language helps you a lot, because what was my impression? Of course, people in China, they know more and more English, and it's the language for communication, but no, not everywhere. And this is maybe the very important point if you want to do the business there. To
absolutely. Absolutely. But I think that's the same everywhere. When I go to Vietnam, I would like to learn Vietnamese. I work obviously with FCEM and with the women from France and speak some French. I think, I know languages are not easy for everybody, but certainly out of Europe, many of you speak many languages. So I think it's a blessing to be able to communicate in a person's language, even if it's not for all the finer details. I think at a certain point you rely a little bit on a translator that you trust for the contracts and for more details. I would never negotiate a contract in Chinese. My Chinese is just not that fluent, but it creates a real sense of connection with the person when you speak the language that they speak. And all of a sudden you've changed. I also think you understand the nuances of the language more, because translation doesn't always capture the essence of what they're actually saying.
Yeah, exactly. But it opens you the door if you know, let's say, just several phrases in the language, original language of the country. So you know some Chinese, some Vietnamese?
No, I'd like to learn Vietnamese, very little Vietnamese. My Chinese and my French are my 2 main languages as well as English. And of course, Australian, because it's not the same here.
Okay, I will check with her, I hope soon. So you speak also French and something else, please?
No, well, the French, I'm originally from Canada. So I originally came from Montreal. I grew up in Montreal. So we were bilingual, learning English and French, both at school and at home. So I had that opportunity to learn a language at a very young age. For a little while, I did also try to learn Thai, but my Thai is very limited. I found I spent more time learning the Chinese. It was hard to invest the time to do both at the same time.
Oh, as they say in French, chapeau. It means that my admiration, because I understand it's very important to know the languages. And yes, you are great. And I suppose that this also, I mean, your interest to all international helps you to develop and to start a cooperation with other countries, as you already noticed. And as you are national president of Australian Women Business Ladies Association, the full and correct name is Women Chief of Enterprises International. Am I correct?
That's right. It's from the French translation of Femme Chef d'Entreprise Mondiale. So we took it literally in Australia when we were first founded in 1985.
And what are the main challenges for women entrepreneurs in Australia? Because you are the president of National Association, maybe you see what are you facing now in this turbulent time, because it's not easy.
It isn't easy. You're exactly right. I think there's a lot of challenges for women. Some of them are women's challenges and some of them are challenges for business in general. And I am pleased to say that in Australia, we do have a level of equality in most environments. So taking a look at our organization, about 3 years ago, we actually questioned, was there still a need for a women's organization for entrepreneurs in Australia? And at the time, we reflected quite deeply and we said, well, yes, there is still a need, but in many environments, we are quite equal. But we see in certain sectors like manufacturing and technology, women are not as well represented. Travel and tourism, we're quite well represented. It's quite equal. And in fact, a lot of women go into tourism businesses. They have a lot of strengths in the connections piece and they play to their strengths. But the other challenges we see it also at the board level. So they still say in Australia, you are more likely to have one of 5 men's names, whether it's Tom, Michael, Peter, David, or John, than you are to be female on a board. And it's even more difficult if you were female from a minority background, so a non-Anglo-Saxon background.
You just remind me, because the big question, let's say, and I dare to say all around the world, is quotas. What are quotas in Australia? Do you have them? Do you don't have them? What's your opinion?
We don't have official quotas. Well, sorry, we do have benchmarks that companies are meant to be meeting, particularly around boards. And what we saw initially happen when they first started talking about them was, particularly for our big listed companies, is that the same few women ended up on a lot of boards. But that was about 8 to 10 years ago. Now we're seeing more new women. So rather than one board member being on 5 or 6 or 7 boards, we're seeing more new faces and more women educating themselves about running businesses around being a board member. So it is starting to diversify, but just this last year, I think we've seen our numbers starting to go back again. Unfortunately, we're regressing. So we need to constantly be vigilant about it. I think it's really important that we don't lose sight of it. And as fast as we think we're doing better, we suddenly find we have issues of harassment or bullying in the workplace, or we have women who... we have the same rights. So from an equality point of view, when businesses first started, many women couldn't open bank accounts or things like that. We needed a male guardian. All of that is gone. Those are all from the days gone past for us. But we do find still that there's still times that being female, maybe you won't get as much funding for your business. maybe you won't receive as much support from the government. And the other final thing is that we find as women, we often lack the confidence. So I think that's where the role of, for example, our women's groups is helping build the confidence of the women business owners, that we trust in our capabilities.
Oh, do you think that the self-confidence is also the issue in your country? Because here in Czech Republic, it's very often when I ask, what's the main problem? And everybody, I know, a lot of ladies, they just answer self-confidence. Self-confidence for ladies.
I don't know if you have the same phrase, but we talk about the imposter syndrome. The idea that we feel like an imposter in our business or in the work that we're doing. So we have one woman who's a member of our organization who she was describing what she did. And she was very sort of putting herself down. And we kept saying, no, you're extremely accomplished. You are doing a lot. You are pivotal to the business. Have pride. And so she thought about it and she thought about it. And we saw her again a few months later. And we said something about her business. And she said, oh, yes, I'm very proud of what I do. Because she wanted somebody, I think, to help validate that from externally. And I think that's something.
Právě jste doposlouchali první část podcastu. Celý díl a další pořady najdete na INFO.CZ.